Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. Today I've got my brother-in-law Lucas, who he has also started his combat group here out of the Cowichan Valley called Company of the Blue Dragon, and they do some medieval combat in real steel with real weapons. It's pretty hardcore. We had Don on, if you listen to just the audio version of Don, and he kind of explained the sport of Buhurt. But Lucas is what really brought it to the Cowichan Valley, in my opinion. And so he's going to talk about kind of how he got started, and I'll ask him some questions. And we'll just kind of go an overview of Buhurt and the activity itself. And then we'll also share some weapons and stuff if you're watching on the YouTube. Okay, so without further ado, Lucas, welcome.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Lucas happens to be Sam's brother.
If you can't tell.
Yeah, they look pretty similar. Anyway, so Luke, you started Company of the Blue Dragon.
Yeah, that was about almost 3 years ago. It'll be 3 years on December.
Yeah.
And basically, it was actually years prior to one of my friends came over and was like, "You got to see this. This is freaking crazy." This was like back in 2011, 2012. And he showed me a video of one of the first Battle of the Nations events over in Europe. And we watched it, and it was like, this is insane. Like, I can't believe people actually do this. But then, being at the time, I would have been 19-ish, give or take. And it's like, oh, that's something I want to do it, but I'm never going to be in that fitness to be able to do it because it's just too intense. Years go by, I start buying more armor, and then all of a sudden it's like, holy shit, I can do this. So then me and Sam and a couple other people were like, well, let's see what we can do and see if we can get a club going. So that was about 3 years ago, as I said. And we didn't have any armor that was well enough for the sport. So we ordered a bunch of stuff online, didn't really know much about what we were doing. And we just started doing runs and doing cardio and trying to build up a physique. So when our stuff came in, that we would actually be able to do something with it.
Right, because the armor itself is heavy.
It's very heavy. Our intro sets were about 100 to 120 pounds.
Holy cow.
And it's a lot of weight.
Now, that has to do with the steel it's made out of, right?
Yes.
So you can get stuff that you're allowed to use in the sport that's lighter, but then the lighter it gets, the more it costs. Is that
exactly.
how it goes?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've kind of got 4 different categories of armor. You've got like mild steel, which has to be really thick because it has no carbon content, so it's incredibly flexible. And that's when it gets super heavy, but it's really cheap. And then you've got stainless steel, which is really hard to work with, but it's a lot stronger. Then you've got your tempered steel, which is you can get really, really thin stuff that will last you for years, and it's not going to dent. And then you've got titanium, which is the lightest. Obviously, titanium wasn't a thing back in the day, but because it's aesthetically the same looking as steel, they've allowed it for the sport.
Right.
Yeah.
So in the sport, they're trying to make it as close to a reenactment. Is that what it is?
Well, there's a couple different clubs out there, but the main two is IMCF, which is the International Medieval Combat Federation, and HMB, which is Historical Medieval Battles. IMCF, I classify it more as HMB's little brother because they're not so strict on the authenticity rules. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of, it looks good at 20 feet, they'll allow it. Whereas with HMB, you have to be able to document your armor on what year it was worn in, what like area of Europe it was in.
That's extreme.
It's very extreme, but
you gotta kind of know your stuff then.
Yeah, hence the name Historical Medieval Battles. They want to try and keep it as period authentic as you can.
And now you're just more into the combat of it, right? Or you were into having it as period as much as you can as well.
I want to do both because HMB is where Battle of the Nations. That's like their big world tournament, and that's kind of the end goal for me. That's the one that like if I can do that, it's like that's
the dream.
That's the
Battle
dream.
Of the Nations.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, you've done a couple competitions now. You did one in Alberta and you did one in the Yukon.
We've done one in the Yukon and then we did 2 in Alberta.
Oh, 2 in Alberta.
Yeah, we had the Canadian qualifiers back in January or February.
Right. Yeah. And so, your group has actually grown pretty good. Like you have a pretty good group of followings that come out to do your practices, and you've got your arena set up. Is there a certain spec for the arenas that you like a minimum size arena that you need to be fighting in?
There is. It's all in the rule book. Unfortunately, I didn't read up on that part. But normally it has to be at least 4 feet high. Ours is about 4.5 feet just from the risers and whatnot. And then, so ours is 15 feet by 25 feet.
Yeah. And they change, like, depending on how many people you're having in anyways, right? Because you can do 3-on-3, and then they have bigger arenas where they have more people. So there's probably not really, like, a set rule. Like, it all depends on how many people are working within the space.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, they've got classifications for your 3s, 5s, 10s, 12s, 16s, 21s, 32s.
Well, so, Sam likes to tell the story of you always wanting to be a knight. So what is the fascination going into armor? Because as long as I've known you, you've had armor.
Yep.
And that's been many years now.
So back when I was a kid, I was over at one of my friends' houses. Like, we're talking back in elementary school. And we were watching TV, and the movie A Knight's Tale came on. With Heath Ledger, and I'd never seen the movie before. It was, I think, relatively new within the previous years, and it was all about jousting and knighthood. And I watched it, and it was like, that is incredible. That's what I want to do. That's something that has always fascinated me. And as the years went on, I got a job, and then it kind of sparked it back, and I was like, well, now I have money. So I bought my first suit of armor back on eBay, or off of eBay. I think that was 2012. Around there, garbage suit.
I remember it. You look kind of like really boxy and really sharp, like edges where you can't really maneuver, like kind of robotic.
The legs were all one piece. They had terrible articulation.
Yeah.
The breastplate ended right here, and the chainmail carried down past.
Right. But I remember when you first wore it out to some other events you went to. It still catches your eye.
It does. Yeah.
I think looking at the stuff you look now looks period because it's all beat up, it's heavy, it has the look. And that stuff back then, even though it was made out of metal, still kind of felt costume-ish. So you've really come a long way
Very much so.
in your suits of armor, and you've gone through a few sets, eh?
Many.
Yeah. And then you've got
Far too many.
Got lots of parts and pieces.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like anybody with any hobby. You kind of purchase and then sell and then trade and upgrade and stuff.
Yep.
So it's pretty good to just start with something and then grow from there. Because you imagine if you were like, I'm going to just wait till I have the money to buy the perfect. You didn't even know this stuff.
No.
Back then. You would never have gotten to this level of armor suits if you didn't start with that first suit from eBay.
Exactly.
That's how those things work. It's kind of interesting. And then, pardon me, something in my throat. And then, so you've brought some stuff here.
Yeah, I've got my full suit, but we don't have to pull it all out. But
but
got a couple things.
Let's take a look. If you're watching on YouTube, why don't you describe this helmet? Because this helmet is probably 10 to 15 pounds.
It's 13 pounds, give or take, just around there.
Yeah, and it's like got these thick leather straps. It's got padding on the inside with some chainmail around the edges here, the neck. The face shoots up. Now, I've worn these in some other videos I did in the past, some vlog-like videos. I suited up and we fought, and like a 3-minute fight is a hard fight.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's kind of becoming our normal right now at practice, because we've got a lot of newer people, but they're really into the sport, and they want to try and do something with it. So instead of just doing the bare minimum, we've been trying to expand, do 2-minute fights, 3-minute fights.
Right.
To try and build that cardio. And
then what other weapons and stuff you guys are using? Like just your group?
So just for what we're doing right now, COVID kind of shut us down a bit for being able to do group fights and whatnot. So we're mostly focusing on duels. So with that, we're using like arming swords, like the one that's beside you there.
Arming sword is like this.
So you like your standard single-handed weapon. Then we do a lot of longsword as well. We don't do too much polearm. It's like with this one right here. As you can tell, it packs a punch.
Okay, so just explain what it is so people who can't see, who's listening on the podcast, what a polearm is, because it sounds different than what it looks like.
So a polearm, it's a shaft of wood anywhere between 4.5 feet to 8 feet, and then it has either like a spearhead or like a big axe head on it. And because of just the sheer size and weight of the weapon, when it comes down on like your head or something like that, there's a big chance of concussions. Especially if you're not in the right gear.
Right. Jeepers. Concussions, if you get a few of those, it can do some pretty good damage to the noggin, man.
It can.
So, are you worried about stuff like that?
I was a little bit at the start because like you watch all the big videos from the overseas tournaments, and there's guys out there that they're known for being able to drop you in one shot. But with all the different, there's a lot of different thicknesses you can go for your helmet. So I went with the thickest helmet I could find.
Smart.
So my helmet here, it's 3 millimeters thick of tempered steel, and it's been used and abused for the past year and a half. And as you can see, there's 2 or 3 very minor dents.
Huge. I think I did that dent right there. Yeah, this helmet is it's sweet. Even just looking at it, it reminds me of that show, The King. Have you ever heard that one?
Yes.
Some static. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, you've seen
the
that
movie.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, the movie The King, and they
it's so good.
they are really realistic in how they operate in the armor. In that way. Spoiler alert. That they go into battle full armor, and so they decide to take it off when it rains the one side.
Yeah.
And that's to add movability. And I couldn't believe how realistic that seemed when they were all getting stuck in the mud and stuff, because it's hard to move in this. I could not imagine going to like an actual war. When you think of war, it's not 3-minute fights like what you're doing. It's however long it takes to finish it.
Yeah. Either until you're dead or until your opponent's completely wiped out. Some of them could last hours, some of them could last days.
Yeah. And they would have to rotate. I'm sure if there was days, they would have to rotate people in and out of armor, because you would just never survive days in a suit of armor like this.
No.
And then, like drowning in one of these things is a real thing. You have a story about that.
Yeah. So years ago in my first suit of armor, we were doing a photo shoot down by the river, and everybody was like, oh, somebody's got to kick you in. So my squire at the time was like, I really want to do it. So we set it up.
Hold on. Before we finish the story, what's a squire? So
a squire is essentially, in medieval times, it was a young boy that basically apprenticed under the knight. So they were the ones that would shine the armor. They would help him put the armor on for a battle. They'd care for the horse. They were not really a slave, but like in exchange for knowledge, they were their lackey.
Yeah, that was step 1 into getting into how to become the knight or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're gonna kick you into the water,
into the river. Yeah,
and you have a full suit of armor
I got
on.
a full suit. That one was about 100 pounds. So he kicked me in, and it was fine. I hit the water. I managed to get back up, but then they wanted to do another take in the water, and so he kicked me in, and I slid down the stream or down the river, and my breastplate hooked into a root under the water,
like a tree root,
a tree root that was stuck in the water. And I couldn't get up, and I was stuck there, and I'm flailing my arm in the air, because I can't talk, I'm underwater, and my squire's sitting there just having a blast, just stabbing me through the water as I'm drowning.
Because he thinks you're playing or doing whatever.
He thinks that I'm just doing it for show, and then 20, 30 seconds go by, and everyone's like, he's not getting up, freaking help him. So they dragged me up, and all was well, but it was a little scary.
Man, that's whoever came up with the idea of kicking a full suit of. Hey, why don't you just put on 100 pounds and then we'll throw you in a river? And then you were like, okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Sometimes you gotta live.
What are the rules and standards for this sport, and how popular is it, or has it become since you've been involved?
So, for rules and whatnot, do you want to start with armor, or do you want to start with the actual rule, like the fighting rules?
Okay, let's start with armor rules, and then we'll move into fighting rules.
Okay, so with armor rules, as I said, for IMCF, it has to look period at 20 feet. Everything you wear underneath, you can wear modern day padding and whatnot, so you can buy the peel and stick foam if you end up getting hit in a spot, and it's a spicy shot, so you pad it up a little bit. And then all their armor is different. Your helmet has to be a minimum of 2.5 millimeters thick of mild steel or equivalent. Everything else can be 1 millimeter thick of mild steel or higher, however much you want to go. Most people go with 1 millimeter thick tempered steel. It's outside of titanium. It's the lightest you can get. and it's the safest.
Okay.
Yeah. So and then when it comes to the rule set, there's really not too many rules out there. If we're going with the dueling rules, essentially you can't kick the front of the knees because that's how you blow out your knees and ends your career.
Mm-hmm.
There's no strikes to the back of the knee and no horizontal strikes to the neck area. And the biggest rule is no thrusting.
No thrusting. So that's because these swords could actually penetrate. Even though it's a rounded edge, it still comes to a point, and with the weight on this, like this is probably 4 to 7 pounds, and with a good thrust, you could penetrate some suits, right?
And it's a big thing with the eye holes too.
Oh yes, because the eye holes are very slim. So
so with the thrust, if it was to go through.
And now Sam did that to Ash by mistake, but it wasn't a thrust.
It wasn't a thrust. So what hers was, from what I was told, I was in the armory working on some things, but I think it was the cross guard.
Oh,
so they went up into a bind, and her cross guard went through the visor and just poked her on the eyebrow. If it was a little lower, it could have been dangerous. But it's really a 1 in a million shot.
Yeah. So, but you are like, when you take up the sport, you are accepting a risk of injury,
exactly,
right? Because it's a high contact, heavy weighted, blunt force trauma type sport.
Yep.
Yeah. It's an interesting take. Like, I would imagine it's a young man sport, but there's probably like some fit older gentlemen. But once you start getting like to a certain point in your life, maybe don't do that because, like you said, knees blow out or back hurts, you fall, you can't get up. What are some of the most common injuries do you think that happen?
The most common injury is probably the torn ACL.
Right.
Because you have so much weight on, and in the melees, the point of the melees is to get the opponent on the ground. Once they've hit the ground, it's kind of like football, 3 points of contact and you're out.
Okay.
So it's the last team standing. With that, there's a lot of throws and a lot of like martial arts skills that comes in there.
Right.
So there's a lot of twisting, and if you happen to get your foot caught on somebody else or something happens and you twist wrong, you can blow your ACL. We had that happen to one of our teammates, unfortunately, at our last tournament. It's a common injury, but it's not going to happen at every event.
Yeah, it's just kind of the one that most people are probably cautious about or know about because that's what happens. I actually have to sneeze here, so everybody just bear with me here. You can feel a sneeze sometimes if you say banana, 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 and it goes away.
Just like that?
Just like that. What was I going to say? Oh, we were talking about injuries, ACLs, and then...
That's like your major, like the biggest major injury.
Right.
You get a lot of fractures and whatnot. A lot of bruises. The hands seem to get injured quite a bit.
You get what Sam calls armor bites, right?
Yes.
So what is that?
So an armor bite, let me just grab a piece here.
Yeah.
So we've got my arm here. So you slide that in here. And an armor bite is essentially if you don't have a lot of padding and you bend, for instance, like your
joints.
arm could get caught in here kind of thing, and then the metal just kind of pinches you.
So anyone who's just listening, it's the arm where the elbow is, and so there's a joint. There's 3 plates of metal on each side to kind of give you a bend so that you can have protection on your elbow. And then when you move your arm, your forearm, and bend the elbow, you can pinch yourself within the pieces of metal.
It's fairly common in like loaner gear and whatnot, stuff that hasn't been fitted to you. But once you've established yourself in the sport and you're buying your own gear, you're going to be buying stuff that's custom made for you. So you end up sending a lot of measurements. In some cases, casting of your own limbs. So the armorer can make it fit perfectly for you. And then in which case you don't get those armor bites as often. I haven't had an armor bite in years. But I know like a lot of the newer guys, because they're wearing stuff that's not made for them. It's too small or too big.
Perfect. Okay. So you kind of got it all, get it custom fitted.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why don't you I'm just going to walk out a frame here for a sec. Why don't you talk about what goes on in what order for putting on your armor?
Okay. So with armor, you want to start at the bottom up. If you put your arms on, you can't put your brig on. The brig is like your centerpiece. It would also be like a breastplate if you're going with a full harness. So you always start at the bottom. I always put my sabatons on first, and then I put my greaves on, which is your calf area. The next comes your cuisses, or your thigh protection that has your knees attached. And then from there, you throw your gambeson on, and then you attach your brig. Then you put your arms on, shoulders, and then helmet and gauntlets. So it can be quite a process when you're trying to suit up like 15 people kind of thing. You kind of get an armor train going on, as we call it, and one person's helping the next, and it's just a train of people putting gear on. Sometimes you can get it done real quick. Other times it takes like 45 minutes to get the full team suited up. And
yeah, it can take a long time. I sat there for some of your guys' setups, and it's like the putting the armor on sometimes can take longer than the fights that you produce in.
Yep.
But I mean, you must be sweating off some serious weight in these.
Oh, yeah.
In these, right? Because the padding for your gambesons and stuff.
I didn't bring one.
Yeah, but they're pretty thick, like a half inch maybe thick, and like full of cotton and other thick, heavy materials that will really make you sweat it just in that alone, and then you put the armor on top of it. So,
and in the heat that we get around here too, like it's there's been some events where like I'll weigh myself in the morning, and then I'll come home after a day of fighting, weigh myself, and I'll be like 5 to 10 pounds lighter than I was in the morning.
Right.
And it's a lot of water weight that you lose.
Right.
So it's really important. Keep hydrated.
Mm-hmm.
We did a little practice last night, and I had like 3 liters of water in the span of like 2 hours.
Just trying to keep yourself hydrated.
Yeah, because it was so hot yesterday.
I'm assuming that heat stroke is like a real thing that happens.
It's
in
a very
tournaments.
big thing. Yeah.
And your whole day on heat stroke if you're not hydrating yourself. This seems like a pretty risky sport. What's the real appeal for you, man? Like, you saw the movie, I get that, but there has to be some sort of other, like, to put yourself kind of in harm's way with a 5.5 foot tall axe coming down on your head, because you can clock people in the head with that.
Yes.
With a 5 foot axe.
Everywhere but here. So you can't
blunt.
hit with the, they call it a hammerback. And essentially that's going to kill somebody. So you can hit with this end. You can hit with the butt end. I can't get it in frame, but yeah, you just can't hit. If it has a hammerback, you just can't use that end.
Okay. So just the blunt force from this will rattle your head enough to put you out.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy. So that's just the impact alone, even through all your armor.
Even through the helmet,
and the padding.
I've taken a couple shots, not with this one in particular, but with other halberds, and you black out for a second. You get hit, and then next thing you know, you're kind of standing a couple feet further from where you were, and your vision kind of gets that splotchy explosions
funny
of
lights.
light.
Yeah. I mean, that happens. I'm sure in all sports you see that funny.
Yeah.
They're like greenish, pinkish, reddish little flakes.
Yeah, it's like little rainbows that just kind of explode in your vision.
Little rainbows.
Yeah.
That stuff is always the worst when it happens to your head, because you kind of always feel a little sick too when that happens. You're like, So what's the worst thing you've had happen for yourself while starting the club?
Injury wise, the most painful one was in the tournament up in the Yukon. I tell this story so often. It was one of the gentlemen that was on the Yukon's #1 team, and he had a shorter axe. It was almost like a fireman's length axe.
Okay.
And his teammate had me pinned up against the list, and he had a shield up in front of my face so I couldn't see anything. He came up behind me, did a full plant with the axe, and laid into me as hard as he could, right into my lower back, almost right to my hip.
Holy cow.
And it hit the armor, which is a good thing because it probably would have shattered something. But just the impact, it caused my my left leg to buckle. But because his buddy had me pinned up against the list, I couldn't go down. Right. So he hit, my leg buckled, and I was stuck there.
And they're allowed to hit you till you're down.
And they hit you till you're down. So then he started working on my head. He got a couple shots in there, broke the strapping off the helmet. It hurt a lot.
Yeah.
I got back up and I did the next fight.
Oh, that's good.
But I was limping for a couple days after that one.
Pretty sore.
Yeah, that one was probably the most painful one. I've had quite a few hand injuries. I'm still recovering from about a month and a half ago kind of thing, to a shot that got me through the shield.
What?
It just had such an impact through that it did something into here.
Whoa.
at the lower base of my
Like
pinky.
the vibrations?
Yeah, something.
Wow.
So now if I take a couple too many shots there, like I can't hold the shield up anymore because it's just painful.
So let's talk about that. So you can use different sorts of combinations of weapons. So you can use like a single sword, sword and shield, axe and shield,
Yep.
different types of shield. Can you dual sword? What are the things that you can do here?
So because we've got 3 different categories. We've got duels, pro fights, and melees. If we go into duel categories, you've got sword and shield, which is normally an arming sword and a heater shield. You could also use a punch shield, which is essentially just it's a small shield that extends past your hand, and it's used for punching, hence the name. And then you've got long sword, and then pole arms, which is
One of those
ones.
The axe thing.
Yeah.
And then, so you guys, do you have to team up with someone with the same weapon set? Like, if you have a sword and shield, does it have to be against someone with sword and shield?
For dual categories, yes.
Dual categories, okay.
So if we move into pro fights, then it's more of a medieval MMA. So that's where your grapples and takedowns and all that come in, and it's a point-based system. So every strike that you do, whether it's a punch, a kick, a knee, even a takedown, counts for points.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to just be with the weapon.
Okay.
Whereas in dual categories, it's only the weapon strikes that count for points.
Okay.
So in pro fights, it doesn't have to be a matched set. So somebody could go in with a pole arm, another guy could have a little buckler and an axe.
Okay.
It can vary depending on who you're fighting and what they want to use.
I gotcha.
Yeah.
It's pretty interesting. And we're gonna jump back into the melees.
Yes. So we did the pro fights, we did the duels. So for melees, it's essentially you can use any weapon set that you want for it. You have your different teams, so you've got 3s, 5s, 10s, 12s, 16s, 32s, 21s, and 150s. So with that, you can use a variety of different things. Normally, they try to have a couple people with a punch shield in either an axe or an arming sword, and then you kind of have your back line that has your halberds and two-handed falchions and stuff like that. So you've kind of got a shield wall to defend your heavy hitters.
Okay.
And then the purpose of the melees is to get your opponent on the ground, so it's the last team standing. Whether that be if you're taking them down with grapples and throws, or if you're hitting them until they don't want to stand anymore.
Right.
Both of them work extremely well.
So the grapples and throws, that's where it comes in when you're saying like it's kind of like an MMA thing. You're using some martial arts throws to get heavier people on the ground, kind of like slight body manipulation and weight manipulation, because getting them on the ground is the end goal. And if you can't do it with a weapon, the next best thing is to
throw.
To throw.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Swallowed a fly. Just kidding. I got some going on. It's COVID. I promise it's not COVID. So you've got your company.
Yes.
It's on your sweater.
So this is our emblem, essentially.
It's two dragons.
It's a single dragon with 2 heads.
Oh, it's a 2-headed dragon. And it's got a flag.
So it's got the BC flag because we're the BC team. So we're the company of the Blue Dragon. Right now we're the only BC team. That's essentially registered in the sport. Yeah.
On Vancouver. So there's none in Vancouver.
There was a team in Vancouver, but the guy that was running it, he had to move to Quebec, and then the team just kind of dissipated. They still do fighting, but they don't do Buhurt.
Okay.
So they do like EMP, SCA, and that kind of thing. So it's a bit of a tone down from what we do.
Yeah. So what's the difference? What's SCA doing that you guys aren't doing, and what are you guys doing that SCA isn't doing?
So the SCA, they mostly fight with rattan weapons. So it's like essentially a really thick, strong bamboo.
Okay.
And that's what their weapons are made out of. Their armor standards are a lot lower than ours.
Right.
You'll see a lot of people that have like open biceps, and for them there's no striking below the knee.
Okay.
And they allow thrusting in it. So it's more of it's a hit by location thing. So if you get hit in the arm, you lose your arm. If you get hit twice in the head, you're dead. Twice in the body, you're dead.
Okay.
Don't quote me on these. I might be wrong. I've never done it, but just from what I've heard over the years.
It's kind of the gist of it. If you guys want to know more, people can just research it.
That's the Society of Creative Anachronisms is the name of that one.
All right. Interesting.
And EMP, I've
never even heard of EMP.
It's oh shoot, I can't remember what the E stands for, but the other two is Medieval Pursuits.
Okay.
So they're more focused kind of on the HEMA side of things. So they like to follow the manuscripts from back in the medieval ages. So it's kind of like your katas in karate. So it's very, if I do this, then my opponent does this, then I do that, and my opponent does this. And it's a lot of counters and a lot of blade work.
Yeah, it's a little more technical.
Yeah.
And
then it's to first blood, essentially. Not actual blood, but the first
contact.
score.
Yeah. Okay. So you're kind of dancing around each other in that sport and trying to get the first hit.
Yeah.
So if you're really two people who are really good, that fight could drag on. If one person who's way better than another person could be a quick.
It could be very quick. Yeah.
So that's quite different than Buhurt, which is actual like almost like going to war kind of deal.
Ours is very much a stamina based. Cardio is king. Because we do for duels, it's a 1 minute fight, and it's a point based. So whoever can score the most amount of points in that minute wins that round, and then it's the best of 3.
Okay.
So there's a chance that it could continue if there's a lot of ties, and it could go to 7, 8, or even 9 matches on occasion.
Okay.
And that's 9 minutes of fighting.
Jeepers.
In full plate, and it's exhausting.
Tired. Yeah, 9 minutes. I don't like. We did the one first little video that we shot.
Yeah.
I think we only fought for like a minute and a half, 2 minutes, maybe tops.
With a couple breaks in between.
Yeah, and you're exhausted. Like that's how heavy this stuff. I throw a little heat on you.
Yeah.
It's hard to persevere. So, I mean, could you imagine being a knight back in the day? Like we have some luxuries here that we can retreat to after you take your armor off. Like back then, there were people like, they live their armor. They polish it. They have many suits. There's famous suits of armor out there, and famous warriors that wore certain suits of armor and stuff. It's hard to believe that there were outliers, people who were better at this than others. Because when you watch Buhurt videos, when you watch any sort of medieval combat type stuff, it looks pretty chaotic. Like it looks pretty crazy. But there were outliers back in these days that just were better than all the rest.
Yep.
And it's crazy that's still today when you watch Buhurt. Like you can talk about certain characters that maybe are better than the others, or people who everybody talks about at the tournaments and stuff, and so. Just like any other sport, but if you watch the videos, it's hard to imagine that someone's better because it's so
chaotic.
It's very chaotic, but it's like a good chaotic. Like if you're really into it and really want to push yourself, I like watching the videos. But you know what? I like watching the videos like you watch skateboarding videos. You want to see someone get messed up.
And it happens quite often. They're not normally serious injuries. There hasn't been a single death in the sport. So that's a bonus for us. But quite often the match will end and there'll be somebody that's not getting up.
Yeah.
So then the medics run in, they drag them off, and normally within 20 minutes the announcers will pop on and be like, so-and-so is okay, he's recovering kind of thing, and life goes on.
How many groups do you think are involved? Like if you have Battle of the Nations, why don't you just talk about that? What is that?
So Battle of the Nations is essentially, it's HMB's World Championships. And it's anybody in any country in the world can send a team. So I think they've got about 36 to 40 countries, I believe, that send fighters. Canada's relatively new at it. I think 2016 is when Canada started. And we've grown exponentially since then. But most of the better teams, like the Russians, win almost every year.
Oh, yeah.
They're not even big guys. Like they're kind of your height, your build, but they train so much and so hard.
They just invest in it.
Yeah, that they just like wipe the floor with anybody. The Ukraine would be the second best. I would classify as. They did beat the Russians a couple years ago, and just watching them fight, like it's intense.
That's
and
crazy.
Hopefully one year Canada will kind of get to that level.
And you can just watch these guys. You just YouTube Buhurt or whatever.
Battle of the Nations. If you want to watch the really good footage, it's Buhurt Tech on YouTube, and he does GoPro footage from a helmet cam. So
How does he mount that?
So they've got this box welded on the front of his helmet, and then it just sits in there. And it's awesome footage because it's like you're actually
In the fight.
and you get to see everything that's going on.
Oh, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, it's worth watching.
Yeah, those fights, they're fucking crazy.
They're insane,
man. And it's one thing for us to talk about it, but when you watch like people just hammering on someone's head,
Yeah.
maybe there's two of them, and there's a guy with a shield punching you, and he's swinging an axe with the other arm, and then there's two guys and they're trying to wrestle you to the ground, and you're trying to knock them down. It's very like alive.
It's intense. Yeah,
it's
and
intense.
there's no holding back. Like they're not pulling their punches. They're not pulling their swings.
And there's other weight classes then, or what's the deal with
There's
that?
only weight classes in pro fights.
Okay.
You've got lightweight, normal weight, heavyweight, and ultra heavyweight.
So is this weight with armor or without armor?
Without armor.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the weight class without armor. So that's pretty good then, because I mean, like a 200-pound guy with 100-pound armor and he's fit is 300 pounds.
It's a lot. I'm in the lightweight category. It tops off at 165.2 pounds, 75 kilograms. And the other guys in my club that are doing pro fights, there's only one of them that's in my weight class. Everybody else is in the ultra heavyweight.
Right.
And the guy that's with me in the lightweight category, he lives in Vancouver, so he only comes over once a month.
Okay.
So I'm training with guys that are my weight when I'm in armor, out of armor.
Okay, yeah. So they're a heavier weight.
So
class.
they're 3 weight classes higher than me.
Yeah. Now there is a skill level to this though. They may be a heavier weight class, but I've seen since you've started, since when I first saw you fighting in the school gym with the other group, to now, you can see technique. So even though they're heavier, when I watch you fight them, your technique is a step above. You're a little bit quicker. Your armor, because you're invested in it maybe more than others, or are doing your research or understanding it. Your armor fits you quite good.
Yep.
And that helps in the battle, because if it's big and clunky, you don't move as much. So, and you've really dialed in. I can see just when you wear it, and you just got that nice blue gambeson.
Yep.
That you're functionable, even though that they're higher weight class than you can kind of get the upper hand with skill and the fact that your suit of armor is fit to you. Yeah,
I just have to keep my range because, like, with the other guys, I can push them, they can push me. But when it comes to the bigger guys, like, I don't have the mass to move them.
Right.
So it's a constant kind of backup. And try to keep my distance. If they get me in a corner, I'm screwed.
Are you just waiting for them to get gassed, like the bigger guys?
Yeah, essentially.
You got a couple heavy guys that go in there full force, and if they hit you a lot because they're coming in like berserkers, they can really like knock you down with some forces. Yeah. But if you dodge around a little bit, about a minute in, they're gonna be at like less than 50%.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then that's when I can then start coming in and doing what I do.
Yeah. I mean, and Sam, like, so the in the professional fights, so Sam wants to do it. My wife Samantha, your sister, she wants to do it. And so are there like rules with women, men, or women against women, or how does it because Sam, she's tall.
Yep.
And
but
she's slender. She's very lightweight. And so, like, a 200-pound guy nailing her in the head concerns me, because even with the armor, so does that go by weight class, or is that like girl boy, girl girl?
So when it comes to like international tournaments, it's men versus men, women versus women. Just because of like
there's a risk factor.
Men are different than women. We build muscle differently. If you put someone like Sam in the ring against somebody like Coyote, and it's a champ, like it's a tournament setting, and there's no holding back, she's not walking out of the ring.
Yeah,
so there's a really big risk factor, at least for what I see, with that. So they classify it men versus men, women versus women.
Right. And now, are there is there any free-for-all type scenarios where men and women mingle at all, or is it just for tournaments it's a no-go, just probably liability factors and stuff like that, right?
In previous years, women could fight in the men's melees, but they've removed that recently because the women's teams have been getting bigger. The sport's actually growing quite a bit when it comes to the women's side of it.
Yeah, girls are starting to get into it.
Yeah.
Eh? Girls are stepping up their game. They're trying to show the boys that armor is not just for them. Knights is just not for being boys.
Yeah, and there's some amazing women fighter out there that would kick my ass all day long.
Yeah. Anyways, I think we should try and wrap it up now. That's about all I've got for time. Thanks for coming out and bringing the armor and explaining this.
Yeah,
Where can people find more information on this sort of stuff, or find more information on your group?
So with us, we're the Company of the Blue Dragon. You can find us on Facebook. We have a dedicated fighter page. So if you're interested in wanting to come out and check it out, maybe join us. You can find that on Facebook. It's just Company of the Blue Dragon. We also have a public page, so if you just kind of want to follow what we're doing and give us a little bit of support, we have the public page, which is Company of the Blue Dragon public page. And that's we post up when we're doing events and whatnot, so you can check us out around the island. Our lead organization is Hacksaw, Heavy Armored Combat Society or Sports Association, and they encompass all of Western Canada. So if you're in Alberta, if you're up in the Yukon, you can go to that page there, and we can connect you there with other teams around Canada.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the sport has been growing even since I've seen you get involved. Maybe it's because I see it more because you're doing it more, but it just seems like it's growing bigger.
Yeah, well, we have one of the biggest teams in Canada now.
Nice.
I think the only one bigger right now is up in the Yukon, the White Wolves.
Okay.
And just because it's kind of funny that they have the biggest team in Canada being up in the Yukon.
Yeah, having a smaller population.
In a very small population, but they've got a really big team, and they're some of the best we've got.
Awesome. Okay. Yeah. Thanks for coming in and explaining that. I love talking about this stuff. Sam's really invested in it just like you. And I've tried it out, and I enjoy it. You can only have so many expensive hobbies, though. So this one's not,
it's a pricey one.
Yeah. I picked hunting versus this when it came to expensive hobbies. But, who knows what the future has in store. I do worry about if I try it, injuries. Maybe I'm a little bit nervous about what kind of the repercussions and stuff could happen. But like you said, I mean, how many people fight so long without any injuries?
Quite a few, yeah.
Okay, guys. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you next time.